Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Tales of Herding God Part 123 based on novel. So let's start. Suddenly, a loud bang rang out as their fists collided. In a split second, Qin Mu executed the 8 form of Thunderclap 8 strikes, 1,000-armed Buddha. He was like a huge Buddha with 1,000 arms smashing countless fists onto his opponent. His fists were so quick that they dazzled the eyes and couldn't be caught with normal gazes. Old Ma's fists were acclaimed as the fists of the Buddha. The realm of the Buddha was also the realm of the god. Old Ma's cultivation was focused on his fists, who were overbearing and steady. However, they also had a multitude of changes, so even though he was only left with an arm, it could still be like 1,000 arms. Even if he didn't use magic power, the strength of his corporeal body could make his moves even more powerful than divine arts. The period when Qin Mu had followed Old Ma to cultivate was when he had suffered the most. Thunderclap 8 strikes was also the fist skill in which he had put in the most effort, yet the young god was able to block his attacks. Not only that, he could even retaliate. Qin Mu shouted out, and his aura suddenly turned wild and overbearing. The youth from Great Ruins had naturally inherited the wild and overbearing nature of Great Ruins. With fierceness and savagery, knife skills appeared among Qin Mu's fist skills. With his hands as knives, he hacked and slashed at all the obstacles in front of him, splitting apart all the injustice that stood in his way. Butcher's knives, the knives of frenzy. Heaven Knife was a maniac that dared to raise his knives at the heavens. His knife skills were the knife skills of a maniac. With overflowing murderous aura and 2 blades in hand, he dared to slaughter all royalty including the emperor, to point his knives at the heavens, to slash at the gods. 2 rapidly moving figures streaked across the sky as clanging sounds rang out like rain. Qin Mu unleashed his skills frantically, seemingly reenacting the scene when Butcher went crazy as he scolded the heavens and pointed his knives at them. Heaven Knife, his godlike knives were blocked down. Qin Mu's heart sank. Formation markings swirled frantically in his eyes, and 4 heavens appeared. 9 heavens eye awakening skill. On 6 directions realm, his magic power was only enough to execute his eyes to the level of Cinnabar Heaven's eyes, but this was enough. Cinnabar Heaven's eyes, Cyan Heaven's eyes, Green Heaven's eyes, and Heaven's eyes, with the effects of these 4 heavens' eyes overlapping one another, 5 colors burst forth from his eyes. The black pupils in the center became even deeper, and each and every movement of the opponent could be clearly captured in his eyes. Blind's eyes were the eyes of a god. They could see through all fabrication, all moves, and all divine arts. They could capture each and every movement of the opponent and predict their next move. From there, they could see through the marvel of the opponent's divine arts and solve them to aim at the opponent's weak points. At that moment, Qin Mu saw the other's eyes. They used a different eye awakening skill compared to his 9 heavens eye awakening skill, since the forehead of the young god split open and revealed a 3rd eye. 5 stars appeared in it. No way. Qin Mu could see rays of light starting to shine in the opponent's divine eye. It was the giveaway when a divine eye was activating its power. The opponent was also proficient in divine eyes, but his divine eye had a corresponding divine arts, whereas Blind hadn't imparted any pupil divine arts to Qin Mu when he taught him. Vital chi started to gather in Qin Mu's eyes, and the formation markings of the heavens' eyes became Heaven's Eyes Ring, Green Heaven's Eyes Ring, Cyan Heaven's Eyes Ring, and Cinnabar Heaven's Eyes Ring. It wasn't the first time he had used his eyes as true origin canon. When he was at Qingmen Pass, he had already tried out the power of it. Are you an overlord body as well? Qin Mu's eyes blazed. In that case, let's see whose divine eyes are more powerful. Their divine eyes burst forth with light, and 5 resplendent rays rushed at each other. The speed was so fast that neither could dodge. Before the divine eyes of the young god had activated, Qin Mu had determined their attributes. What burst forth was a 5-colored light that was different from Long Yu's sword eyes. It was like a 5-colored divine sword that came straight at him. The young god had 3 eyes, and their order was different. The 3 beams of 5-colored light definitely possessed no ordinary power. Boom! 2 figures fell from the sky. Both of them were hit by the other's divine light, and crashed to the ground. 2 mushroom clouds puffed up. Qin Mu leaped up and sucked in a deep and cold breath. He had used the body refinement and chi refinement techniques in great educational heavenly devil scriptures, 9 transformation 3 conditions mystery technique to block the attack. This technique was extremely dangerous, and when Qin Mu had cultivated it, all his energy had been drained. Soon, his body had become like a matchstick and he had almost died. The cultivation of that mystery technique required him to have enough spirit pills to replenish his energy. Ever since that encounter, he had carefully used the technique to cultivate his corporeal body and refine his vital chi for the past 2 years. He had already cultivated to the 4th transformation and 2nd condition. The 1st condition was bones that were inseparably close, while the 2nd condition was body like iron. His vital chi was on the 4th transformation. The 1st transformation was chi like rainbow, the 2nd transformation was like lead and mercury, the 3rd transformation was like a fire dragon, and the 4th transformation was opening the great furnace. It was as if he had hidden a huge and round pill furnace in his body. The vital chi within it was like a blazing fire that protected his body. When it combined with his corporeal body that was like steel and iron, he was able to block the strike. I have great educational heavenly devil scriptures, techniques from my ancestors. Qin Mu leaped up from the pit, his moves quick. In a few steps, he scaled up a mountain and looked toward where that young god had landed. He said in a low voice, "I don't believe you can take my divine eyes." Suddenly, his pupils contracted, for he saw a figure slowly walking out from the dust permeating inside of the pit. The figure slowly became clearer. Still not dead. Qin Mu released a long hiss and executed carefree sword, but then discovered that he couldn't use it here. His vital chi then burst forth afterward as he sprinted toward the young god. "If I can't use my spirit weapon, I shall make one." Outside Hall of 3 Eons, Hermit Qin Mu revealed a smile as he said leisurely, "The god is called Chongming, and come to think of it, what a coincidence, he's also from Carefree Village. Try and guess what his surname could be." Village chief blinked and probed, "Could his surname be Qin as well?" Hermit Qin Mu sneered. "That's right, his surname is indeed Qin. Could Qin Chongming be an overlord body as well?" "Dao brother, you are making me slightly puzzled. Even we little Jade capital don't know about overlord body, so how can you be so sure that there's such a thing as an overlord body in this world?" Village chief rose up and down. He didn't explain anything and just shook his head. "I wonder, why did a god from Carefree Village come to Little Jade capital?" "This senior is one of the founders of Little Jade capital," Hermit Qin Mu explained. "I know from the records that he made a pact of earth count with someone, but afterward, he decided to break it. There were some reasons because of which he had no choice but to do it, thus his primordial spirit was taken away by earth count while his body was left behind. Before he died, he transformed his divine treasures into 7 divine halls. He gave a lot of thought to it, so that even after he died, he would leave 7 divine halls to groom the future generations." Village chief looked at the Hall of 3 Eons and asked in suspicion, 7 divine halls. Could there be Hall of 7 stars, Hall of celestial being, Hall of life and death, and Hall of divine bridge besides the 3 halls? Why can't we see them? The 7 great divine treasures in the human body are one, so the 7 divine halls are naturally one as well. All of the other halls are inside Hall of 3 Eons. Hermit Qin Mu said, "You asked me to open Hall of 6 Directions as well, since I had already opened the other 2 halls, but our little Jade capital actually doesn't have the ability to open Hall of 6 Directions. The god from Carefree Village holds many secrets, and I can't be the judge if I can open Hall of 6 Directions or not. We don't have enough manpower in Little Jade capital, though now that old Dao Master and old Rulai are here, it might be enough. However, they just came to Little Jade capital, so they still need some time to familiarize themselves with Hall of 6 Directions. There were only over a dozen old immortals in Little Jade capital, and opening Hall of 6 Directions required 6 top-notch practitioners. When it came to Hall of 7 Stars, they would need 7 people of their level. For that, Little Jade capital would be even more shorthand. As I thought, even though you are stingy, there was no need to be this stingy to a person from Carefree Village. So that's the reason. Village Chief smiled. Hermit Qin Mu snorted. That god had cultivated everything to the god level. He had divine eyes, divine hands, divine legs, divine corporeal body, and not only that, his primordial spirit had also reached an extremely pure level. The density of his magic power was also at the level of a god. Same as his wisdom. Dao brother, if human emperor chose 3 Eons breakthrough, I'm afraid he won't gain any benefit. Village chief pondered over it, then said slowly, his magic power is also at the level of a god. In that case, Mua has really met his opponent. Hermit Qin Mu didn't understand what he meant. We, the geezers of disabled elderly village, have our personal areas of expertise, and the 9 of us have all reached the god realm in them. However, none of us reached the god realm in the area of magic power. However, Mua's vital chi is so dense that he has done so. Even though his cultivation realm hasn't caught up, the density of his magic power is something that others could never reach. If I was to say that there was someone in the world with a godlike magic power, then that person would not be Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, but only be Mua. Village Chief said indifferently. Hermit Qin Mu also knew how strong Qin Mu's cultivation was and said, "You said that his sword skill was still full of flaws, and when he met someone with greater knowledge than him, he wouldn't even know he died. I think he has already met that person." Village Chief's heart trembled violently. This god is also a sword god. Hermit Qin Mu nodded and seemed to be smiling yet not smiling. Dao brother, can you now tell me about Overlord Body? Village Chief smiled and said leisurely, Overlord Body is unique and surpasses the 4 great spirit bodies. It's the rarest constitution in the world. As long as there is one Overlord Body that has appeared in the world, there can never be a second Overlord Body. However, there will be pseudo-Overlord Bodies appearing to fight over for the fate of the Overlord Body. In Hall of 3 Eons, Qin Mu widened his steps to chase after the young god. His footsteps were heavy, but his speed was extremely fast. With his feet landing on the ground, the soil flew into the air while the land trembled in waves. The soil and shattered rocks that floated upwards were melted in an instant. Some of them transformed into pottery swords, while others into stone swords. Some of the rocks had metal hidden inside them, which was smelted and formed into sharp flying swords. Incorporating forging treasures into battle was Qin Mu's ultimate art, which Mute had not taught him. Applying what he had learned was Qin Mu's expertise. Since he couldn't use the spirit weapons he had brought, he could only make them on the spot. When the 2 of them were about 300 yards apart, Qin Mu had 100 flying swords around him. At that moment, he executed his sword skill. The move he used was sword treading mountains and rivers. Qin Mu recited the name with heroism in his chest. Could the gods be cut down? Say, can. His sword light burst forth, and the flying swords attacked the young god. Sword lights flashed, but since 100 flying swords were too few, more sword lights burst forth from Qin Mu's body to make up for the lack. He rushed forward at a quick speed, and sword treading mountains and rivers laid out mountains and rivers into the distance like a scroll unfurling. This sword skill used all kinds of stuff: Qin Mu's own comprehension, village chief's teaching, imperial preceptor's enlightenment, and Qin Hanzhen's guidance. He had incorporated everything he had learned into his sword. The power of the sword light increased drastically. This was Qin Mu's most powerful move. Even the second move, Sword of Founding Emperor Sea of Blood, couldn't be compared to it in terms of power. This was because Qin Mu had put all his heart and mind into sword treading mountains and rivers, improving this move the most. Compared to the sword treading mountains and rivers village chief had taught him, the power of this move had already increased by several times. While he used his sword skill, there were also sword lights bursting forth from the palm of the young god. Countless sword lights flew over, and Qin Mu was slightly stunned. He immediately saw the mysterious principles behind the sword lights. Carefree Village's sword skills. He is from Carefree Village. Qin Mu didn't have time to think about it. The two sword skills collided, and countless sword lights drowned out both of them. The power contained in the majestic mountains and rivers was released, and the power of the sword skill from Carefree Sword also increased drastically. The three Eons elders stood on top of the sun, moon, and high mountain, looking down. They saw the instant the mountains and rivers broke down, the boundless energy exploding like two snow-white balls expanding rapidly outwards. Remarkable, Heaven Eon Spiritual Master, who was in the sun, exclaimed in admiration. The power of the two moves exploded until nothing was left. Qin Mu and the god flew back and crashed onto the ground. Their bodies continued to tumble backward and rolled down the hills like ragdolls, as they flailed their limbs helplessly. Pack! Qin Mu smashed onto the cliff with sword wounds all over his body, painting blossom markings on the cliff with fresh blood. My sword skills! Qin Mu coughed up blood and slid down from the cliff. He sat on the ground with a thud, unable to wipe away the astonishment on his face. I've lost. It was the first time he had executed his refined sword skill, and had cleanly lost after that. His sword skill had been broken by the opponent. The young god smashed into a mountain with a bang as well, unsettling huge chunks of rock that fell to the ground. There were no sword wounds on the man, but the power of Qin Mu's move was too great, surpassing the limit he could withstand. Purely on sword skills, his sword skills were indeed above those of Qin Mu. Even though Qin Mu had controlled around 100 swords and several hundred sword lights, with sword-treading mountains and rivers, none of them had hit him. Yet the massive power from Qin Mu's move had heavily injured him. When the power of the sword skill exploded, the terrifying energy overwhelmed him. Even though it didn't hit him directly, the crack of his ribs still could be heard. The young god didn't seem to be able to feel any pain. He shook his arms and broke free from the mountain rock. He then slid several dozen yards forward and landed on the ground steadily. Under his armpits, the broken ribs had already pierced through his skin and the bones were exposed outside, yet he seemed to have no feeling at all. He raised his hand to pull out the broken bones, throwing them on the ground. Below the cliff, Qin Mu stood up while swaying. He roared and circulated human king creation technique to seal up the wounds on his body. He didn't choose to use the dragon saliva to heal his wounds, because the opponent's sword will was hidden in his wounds. Without removing it, the dragon saliva wouldn't be able to cure his injuries. Besides, the opponent didn't heal himself either, and he would rather have a fair fight. Overlord body is unrivaled in this world. If I can't win against you, I'm not working hard enough. Qin Mu executed Overlord Body 3 elixir technique, and suddenly transformed into a cow-headed human that stood on twin dragons. Bull's eyes grew out on his forehead and rolled around. Flames blazed around his body, and the two dragons under his feet rushed toward the young god. Using sword treading mountains and rivers had exhausted Qin Mu greatly, and if he continued to fight like that, he wouldn't be able to endure for much longer, thus he needed to change his style. The body of the young god also transformed, but he chose the form of Venus Sovereign, who was also standing on twin dragons. However, they were formed by gold chi while the dragons under Qin Mu's feet were formed by fire chi. The twin dragons below their feet sprinted forward, and the two of them suddenly changed their directions to rush horizontally toward a mountain to the side. The huge dragons gripped their claws onto the cliff and moved as if they were flying to scale up the mountain. Meanwhile, on the dragons' backs, the two were in their transformed states. They unleashed their most powerful divine arts, attacking one another. The huge mountain was extremely high, and it was the one on which Earth Eon's spiritual master was standing. Even though it was 3,000 yards high, Qin Mu and the young god fought their way up the mountain peak. The two of them changed their techniques over and over again, and the 5 great god transformation states of 5 elements realm were all executed by the two of them. Sometimes they were the human-headed Jupiter Sovereign, with the body of a bird, while at other times they were the human-headed Saturn Sovereign, with the body of a snake, or the scarlet-haired Mercury Sovereign, as they fought each other with all their might. Earth Eon's spiritual master raised his hands, and this huge mountain began to grow higher. The mountain range expanded to become larger and taller. Qin Mu and the young god continued to go upwards as rocks flew in all directions from their commotion. His magic power isn't any weaker than mine as well. His definitely an overlord body. Qin Mu's was ineffably astonished. He had already subconsciously lost the upper hand, and was only defending against the opponent's attacks while smelting rocks and stones to make stone, iron and copper swords, in an attempt to take advantage of having weapons. However, since he was distracted, he was being suppressed. Even though the young god was below him, he was forced to retreat upwards. The flying swords that Qin Mu had made were struck away continuously, until one could see the path they had taken from broken swords, pieces scattered everywhere. The two figures were nearly as flat as the ground while they continued to sprint upwards, showing no signs of their momentum slowing down. This mountain can't go any higher. If it continues to rise, it will crumble. Earth Eon's spiritual master frowned, and was about to leave the mountaintop, to let them fight to their heart's content, when Qin Mu suddenly mobilized all of his magic power. Human Emperor is still too young. He forged too many flying swords and exhausted quite a lot of magic power. Now that he's fighting the young god with his brute force, he might not be able to win. As Earth Eon's spiritual master said this, the two were blown backward by the vibrations and left the mountain. Qin Mu was jolted high up while the young god was blown downwards. Qin Mu tried to stop his body, and the sores on his body instantly split open, spurting blood. The outcome is decided, he shouted out and rushed downwards. Everywhere he passed by, the stone, iron, and copper swords would fly to attack the young god. The whole mountain was filled with all kinds of swords he had forged, so at that moment, there were countless blades under Qin Mu's control. The blades were all attacking the young god, who had no time to avoid, so his vital chi burst forth as he executed his sword skill. The concentrated sword lights, that were like a storm, collided with the flying swords. His sword skill was indeed profound, but he had still lost the favorable position, thus he gotten sent to the bottom of the mountain by the power from above. Meanwhile on the cliff, even more stone, iron, and copper swords flew out to converge into a flood of swords. The speed of each blade was different, and the way they moved was also different. They were sometimes slow and sometimes fast, sometimes advancing and sometimes retreating. What Qin Mu had executed was still sword-treading mountains and river, the move which possessed the strongest power. The sword light of the young god would break through the sword rain from time to time, landing more and more blows on the youth's body. Qin Mu seemed to feel no pain, as he used his sword skill to pressure the young god to smash him down. The ground came closer and closer. You've lost. Qin Mu revealed a smile as countless swords smashed the young god ruthlessly onto the ground. Boom. The ground trembled violently, and wind swept chunks of mountain rocks, which it threw in all directions. A huge and deep pit appeared on the ground, surrounded by broken blades. Bang! Qin Mu fell down as well and created a huge pit that was only slightly smaller. His feeble voice then came from there, "You are a pseudo-overlord body, he. At that moment, movement could be heard from the other pit, and Qin Mu's blood ran cold. "You're still alive." Qin Mu struggled to get up when cracking sounds came from his legs. The bones there had fractured when he got smashed, and when he exerted force just then, they instantly broke. His whole body convulsed from the pain, and his arms broke as well. Qin Mu then didn't dare to move anymore. Even twitching and taking in a deeper breath became something he didn't dare to do. He was scared that more forceful inhale could shatter all his bones. His magic power was completely exhausted, so he couldn't even retrieve the dragon saliva from his Daotai sac to heal himself. Pain flooded him, and beads of sweat continuously flowed out. The sword made wounds all over his body split open, and fresh blood flowed out. Qin Mu felt his body grow warmer, as if he was as scorching as lava. However, he knew this was actually an illusion. Because he had lost too much blood, his body gradually cooled down, creating an illusion in his brain. He had learned about this from apothecary. If he continued to lose blood, he was bound to die. An explosion came from the huge pit nearby, and Qin Mu felt decrepit. Could it be that I'm the pseudo-overlord body? No, I'm just not working hard enough. I haven't unleashed all the abilities of the overlord body. He had bet almost his whole life to win by half a move, but this had exhausted him of all his battle power. Suddenly, 3 streams of air currents burst forth from the huge pit, and landed on Qin Mu like 3 long rainbows as they entered his body. Qin Mu instantly felt his bones move and reconnect. The cracks sealed up while the wounds on his body recovered rapidly. The few teeth he had lost from the fight earlier were also actually growing out. Qin Mu was stunned, but then he heard a flood. The sound was coming from his body, and it originated from his surging vital qi. His cultivation was actually recovering rapidly. His strength was also recovering, and the tears in his muscles repaired themselves. Soon, all of his injuries were more or less healed. Not only that, he also felt the strange power coming from the 3 rainbows cause his spirit embryo divine treasure to undergo a drastic change. His vital qi seemed to liquefy and embrace it, which made it look like the spirit embryo was soaking in a warm ocean that was incomparably comfortable. The last time I experienced such a comfortable feeling was probably when I was 3 years old or so. I had fallen asleep on Granny's bed and tried so hard to find a latrine in my dreams. When I finally found it after much difficulty, I ended up wetting the whole bed. I was then lifted up by my leg and thrown into the snow by Granny. Qin Mu blinked. What he felt had to be the so-called 3 eons, Heaven Eon, Earth Eon, and Water Eon. The energy of the 3 eons flooded over, and spirit embryo divine treasure underwent a huge change. It grew at a fast speed, while the spirit platform under its feet became bigger as well. It was like a tiny land in the middle of the sea. The vital qi breathed out from the spirit embryo's nose rose into the air, and surging vital qi gathered alongside it, forming a bright red ball that hung in midair. It didn't look like a sun. The liquefied vital qi gathered together into what seemed like a ball of water, but not the moon. His spirit embryo divine treasure still couldn't be compared to that of a god. Qin Mu tried to execute it Overlord Body 3 elixir technique, and felt that it was still difficult to circulate it. There had to be some hidden injuries that hadn't yet healed. Congratulations Human Emperor for succeeding in 3 eons breakthrough. Suddenly, the mountains vanished and the sun and moon in the sky also disappeared without a trace. Qin Mu lay in a huge hall, ice-cold floor beneath him. He struggled to get up and saw 5 elders sitting in 5 positions. They were high on top and looked as ancient as 3 eons elders. He looked around, but it wasn't the hall of 3 eons that he saw. The place looked like another huge hall. The appearances of the 5 elders were also different from those of the 3 eons elders. Qin Mu composed himself, as his muscles continued to ache and his arms and muscles shook, unable to stop. Where are the 3 old immortals from earlier? Qin Mu asked in a trembling voice. 3 eons elders are not here. One of the old wanderers may have been short, but his voice was extremely loud and clear. We are 5 elements wanderers, and this is Hall of 5 Qi. We saw Human Emperor achieving 3 eons breakthrough from Hall of 5 Qi, and we really admire you. After Human Emperor broke through, you were sent to our Hall of 5 Qi to face the test of 5 Qi. I achieved 3 eons breakthrough. Qin Mu was surprised and delighted. However, his legs didn't listen to him and couldn't stop shaking. His indeed the pseudo-overlord body, while I'm the true overlord body. The youth was pleased with himself. 5 elements wanderers heard what he said and were confused. They revealed expressions of doubt, as they didn't know what was overlord body and its pseudo-version. Qin Mu tried his best to stand steadily, but his legs kept shaking badly. His arms also didn't listen to him. One of the old wanderers frowned and said, Human Emperor is the second person who has passed 3 eons breakthrough. Do you plan to challenge 5 Qi breakthrough? Qin Mu just sat down on the ground, so that he wouldn't embarrass himself for not standing steadily. He asked, how is 5 Qi breakthrough compared to 3 eon breakthrough? It's slightly more difficult. When Human Emperor achieved 3 eons breakthrough, your foundation became even more firm. So 5 Qi breakthrough shouldn't be too difficult for you, an old woman said with a pleasant face. It's still slightly more difficult. Qin Mu was frightened and shook his head. 5 seniors, could you get around the regulations and allow me to challenge another day? He was simply too weak to challenge 5 Qi breakthrough right then. Even though he had achieved 3 eons by defeating the young god, and his injuries had mostly healed, the soreness in his corporeal body wasn't even close to fading away. Furthermore, the last strike, when going down from the mountain that was several thousand yards high, left an impact on him that was too large for his heart to withstand. Not only was his corporeal body trembling, his soul was also swaying to and fro, almost leaving his body. The 5 wanderers could see that his condition wasn't good, so they looked one another in the eyes. One of the elders said, our little Jade capital has never had this happen before. If someone passes the test of 3 eons, they can enter our Hall of 5 Qi and leave when they are defeated. Taking a break midway has never happened before. An old woman then spoke up. However, 3 eons breakthrough is too rare. The last person to break through is from 7,000 years ago. Since Human Emperor was able to reach this step, it would be truly too much if we didn't agree to let him challenge the hall another day. The 5 elders discussed it for a time, then the elder in the lead said, since Human Emperor has asked, our little Jade capital is not that stubborn. When Human Emperor recovers, he can come and challenge our Hall of 5 Qi. Many thanks. Qin Mu struggled to get up and thank the 5 elders. When he straightened his back, the sight in front of him changed and he appeared outside Hall of 3 eons. The 3 eons elders were talking to Hermit Qin Mu, who had an expression of astonishment, while Village Chief had an unpretentious look of pride. Human Emperor. The 3 eons elders greeted him, and Heaven Eon Spiritual Master asked in astonishment, why has Human Emperor come out before taking the test of 5 Qi? Qin Mu's legs were still shaking, so he said, 5 elements wanderers knew that my condition wasn't good, so they allowed me to come back later for the challenge. Immortal Qin Mu, can I get a few days before the test at Hall of 5 Qi? Hermit Qin Mu's expression softened and he said firmly, human emperor's condition now is indeed not suitable to continue fighting. There's Hall of 6 Directions after Hall of 5 Qi, an old Tao master, an old Rulai still need some time to familiarize themselves with it. Oh well, human emperor can come to our little Jade capital another day to break through both halls. Qin Mu probed, in that case, about inviting the experts of little Jade capital to come down the mountain. Hermit Qin Mu smiled. I had promised to come with you if you defeated the 3 disciples of my little Jade capital. Now that you achieved 3 Ian's breakthrough as well, you have already exceeded my expectation. Since I have promised you, I naturally can't go back on my word. Qin Mu was astonished. Hermit Qin Mu didn't show him a single pleasant expression since he had come up the mountain, scorning him from the start, yet he was suddenly so easy to talk to. Hermit Qin Mu looked at the 3 Ian's elders and said, 3 senior brothers, I shall follow human emperor down the mountain to settle some worldly affairs. May senior brothers help me look after my duties during these days that I will not be on the mountain. Water Eon spiritual master said, the worldly affairs are full of distractions and the hearts of immortals can be hard to calm. Be careful of disturbing your clear heart when you go down the mountain. Hermit Qin Mu smiled. I have already underwent an experience in the mortal world, so my mortal heart is long dead. Don't worry, I'll definitely return. He called Wang Muren, Mu Qingdai, and Long Yu over and said, I'll be going down the mountain with human emperor, so come with me. There's no need to stay in little Jade capital for your entire lives. I know there's little joy in accompanying us old men and women. The 3 were surprised and delighted. They had wanted to go down the mountain for a long time, but what could they do when little Jade capital had strict rules? Hermit Qin Mu would never allow them to go down the mountain under normal circumstances. Hermit Qin Mu excused himself from old Tao master and old Rulai, and the 2 elders smiled. We have just freed ourselves from the worldly affairs and came to little Jade capital for peace. Yet now you are jumping into the mortal world. Immortal Qin Mu, I'm afraid you won't be able to jump up once you are tainted. You guys are worrying too much. I'm just going down to keep my promise, and I'll return once I fulfill it. The worldly affairs won't hold me back, Hermit Qin Mu said solemnly. I sure hope so. Hermit Qin Mu then invited 2 more old immortals over. Yu Yun, Yu He, both of you senior brothers are proficient in algebra. Will you follow me down? The 2 old immortals smiled and said, it's good to go down for a stroll. Wang Muren rode a buck which was Wandererjan's mount. This master had died under Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's hand, but his mount had been kept by Wang Muren. That buck was no inferior to the Dragon Chileen, and because the Dragon Chileen was fat, the buck seemed more muscular in comparison. He looked at the Dragon Chileen from the corner of its eyes, and was full of disdain for the fat cat. The Dragon Chileen was long used to it, and didn't pay any attention. Yet Xiong Chia whispered to him, Fatty dragon, the buck is looking down on you. Even if he spits in my face, it will dry off by itself, even without wiping it away. The Dragon Chileen seemed to have long achieved enlightenment. Let him think what he wants, it's merely a cool breeze brushing past a mountain. Everyone left little Jade capital, and Hermit Qin Mu turned back to take a look. He sighed ruefully and said to village chief, many years ago, I had left this place with you. My heart was full of ambition, and wanted to achieve a world-shaking feat with you. When I came back, my will was low and my great ambition was cleanly erased. I thought I would never leave again, and never did I expect to be invited out of little Jade capital by your disciple. Fate truly makes a fool out of people. It's not Mua who invited you, but actually your heart that has moved, village chief said meaningfully. Is it the wind moving, or the banner moving? It's just the humane heart that's moving. Hermit Qin Mu laughed. You're wrong, my mortal heart is already dead. It won't come back to life. Village chief shook his head with a smile. Your mouth is like a blade, but your heart is like tofu. Mua, don't look at how this old fellow is always fierce with you, for he's actually the softest. If you make him sad, his tofu heart will cover the whole floor and no one will be able to piece it back together. Hermit Qin Mu sneered and said, My heart can't be pieced back together. You were still sprawling on the floor and crying just moments ago. Village chief was furious. When Fairy Shueqi left you back then, who was the one sprawling on the ground and bawling his eyes out? You cried so miserably just now, needing human emperor to hug you. When you shamelessly cried for reconciliation, did you think how I would use it to scorn you now? You even wiped your snot on human emperor's chest. Qin Mu stared with his eyes wide open. The two old men were almost 1,600 years old added together, yet they still fought non-stop, exposing the faults of each other and digging out the ugly past. They are becoming younger and younger, they're like old children. Qin Mu shook his head and thought to himself, where has Grandpa Cripple gone to? If the experts of Dao sect didn't catch up to him, he should have entered Little Jade capital long ago. I was delayed for 2-3 days here, so it should have been enough for Grandpa Cripple to rummage through Little Jade capital several times. Also, I wonder how's the battle on the prairie. Did Imperial Preceptor reach Roland's Golden Palace? On the large snow mountain outside Roland's Golden Palace was a massacre. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had his hands behind his back, standing expressionless. His gaze moved to the majestic palace that was decorated with gold and jade in glorious splendor. Behind him, the army of Eternal Peace army of tens of thousands of men was arranged in neat rows. The soldiers didn't make any sound, and even the strange beasts of the army were silent. A general came forth and said as he bowed, Imperial Preceptor, Khan Wandi has come to surrender. This video will end here.